Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I am participating in a celebratory blog hop for Studio Katia. So I will have all of the details and info on that in the description box below the video, which will link directly to my blog post about all of that. So for today's card, I am using the Studio Katia Thank You So Much stamp set here. And I have a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock in my Mini Misty. And then I'm inking up the stamp with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. And because it was such a large stamp, that's why I pulled out my Misty for this. And I was right, I needed to stamp it twice. So stamped it, opened it up, inked it up again with the Intense Black ink, and stamped it a second time. So once I was happy with that, I can get to coloring in this image. I decided to use my clean color real brush markers. Again, it's kind of a theme the last couple of videos I've been saying. I've been getting better results with my Bristol Smooth cardstock, so I keep wanting to kind of experiment more and more with it just to see if it's just a fluke or for some reason I'm, either getting better at it or I've mentioned before there might be a chance that I have like different batches mixed together, so some of the papers weren't as good. I don't know. So I keep reaching for it, and so far, so good. So I'm just using one clean color real brush marker here. I'm just using the dark pink, and I'm just scribbling on a little bit of the color and then pulling it out with my water brush. Really, really simple. Nothing fancy. I did contemplate, you totally could, like, blending colors, doing a couple, 2 or 3 different colors. Like, you could have so much fun with an image that's this size, and it's a floral, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. But I just decided to keep the coloring pretty simple. So, like I said, coloring the marker, pulling it out with a water brush. I was wiping the water brush here and there onto, this is just a blue Chucks. I've had people asking about these again lately. I had mentioned them quite some time ago. I have a bunch of these. They're like the type the dentist uses with the like plastic backing and that. You can order them from Amazon. I'll have a link in the supplies. I like them for watercoloring and things like that because of that little bit of plastic backing on them. You can heavily soak these and it's not going to seep through. So if you're at all like me and your desk is a mess and this is laying on top of other papers, you're not going to wreck things. So, and I can get a lot of use out of one. I just keep flipping it over to a clean side and keep going. So I kept wiping off the brush in between here and there because I wanted to have, some lighter areas and darker areas. And this is a pretty pigmented marker. So when my water brush would have too much pink in it, I would just wipe it off there on the Chucks and then keep going on to the next petal. So once it was all dried, I have the coordinating die for this floral and I want to create a window. So the easiest way to do this, I figured, was to grab a scrap piece of typing paper that is cut to the same size as the main image here. And it's hard to see on camera, but in real life, I was able to see through the typing paper to line up the die exactly where it needed to go. So I just looked through the paper, lined up the die cut it. So I've created a window with typing paper, made sure it's still lined up the way I wanted. And then I grabbed a second piece of Bristol Smooth, again, cut to the exact same size as the watercolored image. And then I put the typing paper, the outer portion of it, on top of that Bristol Smooth and was able to press the die in and line it up again exactly. And then this way I've got it die cut in the exact right place. So I've created my window. And then I wanted to die cut these a second time. I just used the largest die from the My Favorite Things Blueprints 1 Dynamics just to trim both of these down because I wanted to create, like I said, I want to create a window for the shaker element, but I wanted to trim it down a bit so it wasn't as big. The original pieces were like 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so standard A2 size. And I wanted these to be a little bit smaller so that they were nicely layered on top of an A2 card. Plus I wanted to add some pattern paper and fun things. So when I cut the front part where the window was, you can see there it cut right across the edge and I was okay with that. I just used my Xyron Mega Tape Runner to add adhesive to the back of it. And then I cut a piece of transparency just slightly smaller than that white cardstock and adhered that to the back side of the front piece there. And then I grabbed some pattern paper that was sitting out from a previous card. This is the Simple Stories Love and Adore You pack. I thought the black stripe would be perfect with this. And then the polka dots, I was like, yeah, the pink is fairly similar to the pink on this flower, so I can use that too. So I cut a couple strips of that, and then just to tie it all together, I grabbed a piece of Simon Says Stamp Doll Pink cardstock, which happens to just be like almost a perfect match to the Zig dark pink marker, and just trimmed down a really tiny strip of that. So I'm going to adhere the pattern paper over that edge there where the transparency goes right up to the edge. That just gives me a spot to put the foam tape on the back to actually create this into a shaker. So if someone wanted to do something similar, but you didn't want to use pattern paper in that, you could totally use, I was thinking while I was doing this, I'm like, this would work for the fuse tool. Instead of using a transparency, you could use that, create it that way. I've seen other people do that where the window goes right up to the edge or something. So then they use the fuse tool and just create basically a shaker pocket instead of a window. So it's an option. It was running in the back of my mind, but I already had this kind of all planned out in my head as I was making it. So I just kept going with what I was doing. So I adhere the pattern paper and a little strip of cardstock. And then I decided with this die, there comes a thank you and a so much die. So I grabbed the thank you die and I'm going to run it through my Big Shot with some MFT blue raspberry cardstock. And I decided to back it with some stick it adhesive just because this is more of a fiddly die for me. So I was like, oh, I don't want to sit and fiddle with a bunch of adhesive. It'd be just easier. So I peel off the backing of stick it and you press it to the back of the cardstock really, really well. And then I'm going to run that through my Big Shot to die cut the sentiment. And then I'm able to peel off the backing a second time from the die cut sentiment. And again, I was just going to adhere this as is once I got everything pulled apart, peeled off, remove the centers from the words here. And like I said, this is a little more like finely detailed sentiment, which I really like. And I was just going to adhere it as is, but as I was looking at it, I'm like, ooh, I could add some shimmer because of the sequins I want to use and their shimmer and all that stuff. So I grabbed one of my Spectrum Noir sparkle pens. This time I'm using soft jade instead of clear. I always use clear, but I have like all the colors. So I grabbed soft jade, which is a really pale sort of a green color, because I wanted to kind of tint this more to the kind of greeny blue sequins that I'm going to use for the shaker. So I coated it with that, and then I just used my heat tool to dry it a little faster. And then picked this up with my tweezers and then pressed it in place. That's the thing with stick it adhesive, is it gives you kind of time to fiddle and it's not permanently adhered until you really press it down. So once that was pressed down, I can now start backing this window with my foam tape. So I grabbed my big Scotch Precious foam tape roll here and took a long strip and doubled it up. Just saves a ton of time when creating shaker cards like this. So doubled it up and then got to adhering all of this foam tape to the back, creating my window. So basically just went around the perimeter. I had a little bit left over, so I ended up adding a little bit to that bottom corner there. It just kind of fills up the space. You don't have to add as many sequins when creating shaker cards. So, because otherwise they're hiding basically behind the parts that aren't the window. So once I was happy with all that, I'm going to start adding my sequins. So I'm using Studio Katia's Crystal Clear Fusion sequins first. And then I added some of their Rainbow Fusion, which is, oh, I love these sequins. So that's what inspired kind of the sentiment, because there's those kind of aqua, bluey green sort of sequins in that mix. And plus the really hot pink, which also goes with the flower. So I sprinkled some of those in and removed the foam tape, and then I flipped over the watercolored piece and just kind of lined up the bottom corners. That's why I had everything in the same size, or like cut down to the same size, because it made it easier to line everything up. And then I've got this fun floral window shaker going on here. So once I had those adhered together, I grabbed some baker's twine from my stash, which again, the pink just kind of matches. So some doodle bug baker's twine, and cut that down and then wrapped it over the area where the pattern paper is. So I start tying my knot, and then I use my reverse tweezers to pinch that area of the knot closed, and then that way I can fiddle and get the bow exactly how I want it without having to hold everything closed at the same time. And then you're basically trying to fight the twine, you know, to get it to stay tight while tying the bow, etc., etc., etc. That is where these reverse tweezers are absolute little lifesavers. So that held it in place. I got my bow exactly how I wanted it, and then I just hold up the card front here and trim off the excess on the tails with my scissors. And then I can go on to creating the card base. So I took another piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 11. And then I scored it at 5 1/2 with my Teflon bone folder. So it'll be a top folding A2 sized card. And decided this time, because I was thinking I'll finish the inside before adhering, especially this larger shaker element to the outside. So I pulled out my Misty again and lined up this flower more onto the bottom left of the inside of the card. And I pulled out Simon Says Stamp's Dull Pink ink and pulled out the card base for a second here and just used another piece of this just copy paper as a scrap so I could stamp the image first with the dull pink ink and then use the second generation of that to stamp on the inside because I wanted it to be a little paler. I didn't want it to be super bright and take up a lot of space because the Simon Says Dull Pink ink is such a bright, like deep color of ink. So this is a little paler than I would have liked, honestly, but I was still okay with it just because I just wanted to get this done. So I lined up the sentiment that comes with the set, or the remaining part of the sentiment. They're stamps, and then you can get the dies as well. So I used the die on the outside, and then I used the companion little stamp on the inside, so there's so much. And again, this is where the Misty came in handy because it just didn't stamp perfectly the first time, so I ended up stamping it 3 times with the intense black ink to get it how I wanted. And then I've just been cleaning my stamps here off and on with baby wipes. And I always link to these. I use the Costco ones because they are the best ones. They don't leave all those little fibers all over your stamps like some of the other baby wipes do. Been using them for years without a problem. So, love them. Anywho, once everything was stamped, I'm going to adhere another couple little strips of this same pattern paper that I used on the front of the card. So get the larger strip and the smaller strip covered with adhesive from my little Xyron Mega Runner, and then I'm going to adhere those. And then once they're adhered, I can flip this over and trim off the parts that are hanging over the edge of the card there with my scissors. And then once that's done, I can use my Xyron again to add adhesive to my shaker card front here. So going all around the perimeter, and then I'm going to adhere that to my card base. And was almost done, but decided to add just a few more sequins to the outside of the card just to kind of tie it all together and give it a little more extra bling anyway. So that, and plus I just like dumping out these sequins because they're pretty. So I fiddled with that for a bit until I decided to only add 3 more sequins to the outside. I didn't want to go completely nuts since, you know, there's so much going on with the shaker element and that. And then I just used my little Tonic Nouveau adhesive, just little dabs of that, and press the sequins into place, and that finished off my card. So, as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post with links to all the supplies used. There'll be a link to the main post for this hop. All that kind of info will be in my blog post linked directly below the video. So check that out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!